It starts as nothing, a twinge when you drink something cold, a twinge when you drink something cold. 3 days later, it is all you can think about. The nerve inside your tooth is dying, and it is taking its time. Today you make a phone call, someone numbs your face, drills out the decay, and you go home. For 300,000 years, that was not an option. No phone, no dentist, no painkiller, no antibiotic, just you and a nerve that will not stop. So what did they actually do? The answer is buried in a handful of teeth scattered across Europe and Asia, and it is not what anyone expected. Start with why a toothache is different from every other pain. Your tooth is a sealed box, hard enamel on the outside, living nerve on the inside. When that nerve becomes infected, it swells, but it has nowhere to swell into. The pressure builds inside a box that cannot expand. This is why toothache is famous. It is pain with no release valve. And if the infection breaks out of the root, it does not stop there. It moves into the jaw, then the neck, then, sometimes, the bloodstream. In London's bills of mortality in the 1600s, teeth were listed as a cause of death. In some years, they accounted for a measurable share of all deaths in the city. A tooth could kill you, everyone knew it, and nobody could stop it. Which brings us to a cave in northern Italy, Riparo Villabruna, a rock shelter in the Dolomites. Inside it, archaeologists found the remains of a young man who died roughly 14,000 years ago. One of his molars had a cavity. That part is ordinary. What was inside the cavity was not. The inner walls carried a series of fine parallel striations, deliberate marks. Researchers compared them against cut marks made by stone tools on bone. They matched. Someone had taken a sharpened flint point and scraped the rot out of a living tooth, 14,000 years ago, with no anesthetic of any kind. Think about what that room was like. About 1,000 years later, and 100 miles south, someone went further. At Riparo Fredian, near Lucca, archaeologists recovered 2 upper front teeth from a single individual. Each one had a hole running from the surface all the way down into the pulp chamber. Stefano Benazzi, an archaeologist at the University of Bologna, analyzed them under microscope. The marks inside showed scraping and twisting. A handheld tool worked in a rotating motion. But the holes were not empty. Packed inside both was bitumen, natural tar. The same substance those people used to waterproof baskets and fix stone points into handles. Trapped inside the bitumen were plant fibers and hairs. Nobody is certain what those were for. Drill out the decay, pack the hole. That is a filling. 13,000 years ago. Then there is the jaw from Slovenia. It sat in a museum in Trieste for over 100 years. Nobody looked closely. In 2012, Federico Bernardini and Claudio Tuniz borrowed it to test new X-ray imaging equipment. On the left canine, there was a deep vertical crack running down into the living tissue. And the crack was filled with beeswax. Radiocarbon dating put the wax at the same age as the jaw, 6,500 years. The man was between 24 and 30. His teeth were severely worn, not from food, from work. People used their teeth as tools, softening leather and gripping thread. The wax sealed the crack and covered the exposed nerve underneath. It did not cure anything, it just stopped the pain when he bit down. And then there is Mehrgarh, a farming village in what is now Baluchistan, Pakistan, 9,000 years old. In 2006, a team led by Andrea Coppa published their findings in Nature. 11 drilled teeth from 9 different adults. The holes were near perfect circles, some only 1 to 3 millimeters across. Some went 3.5 millimeters deep, into the hardest tissue in the human body. The tool was a bow drill, a flint tip mounted on a rod spun by a bowstring. It was the same tool the village already used to drill holes in beads. The bead makers were the dentists. The skill transferred directly. And we know the patients were alive when it happened. The teeth show signs of healing afterwards. No anesthetic, fully conscious. A stone spinning against a living nerve. This was not a one-off. The practice continued in that village for 1,500 years, and then it stopped. Around 6,500 years ago, the drilling disappears from the record. Nobody knows why. But the oldest evidence of all does not come from our species. El Cedrón Cave, northern Spain. Around 50,000 years ago. A teenage Neanderthal boy. His jawbone carries the unmistakable hollow of a dental abscess. He also had an intestinal parasite. By any measure, he was extremely unwell. And hardened plaque on his teeth preserved a record of what he had been putting in his mouth. A team led by Laura Wyrick and Alan Cooper sequenced the DNA trapped in that plaque. They found poplar. Poplar bark contains salicylic acid. That is the active compound in aspirin. And they found Penicillium, the mold that penicillin comes from, 40,000 years before Alexander Fleming. Now, we cannot prove he understood why it worked, but of the individuals tested at that site, only the one with the abscess had both substances in his mouth. A sick teenager, 50,000 years ago, chewing on the two things that would eventually become aspirin and penicillin. But here is what all of this leaves out. These teeth are famous because they are rare, a handful of cases across 3 continents. For almost everyone else, there was no procedure. There was only waiting. You waited for the nerve to die. That took days, sometimes weeks. Then either the pain stopped or the infection spread and you did not survive it. And the archaeological record is full of the aftermath. Teeth ground flat, jawbones with abscess cavities eaten into the bone, sockets that healed shut after a tooth was pulled or fell out. Most of what people did about toothache left no trace at all. Someone sitting with you, something chewed and pressed against the gum, a voice in the dark. You have a dentist. You probably find the appointment mildly annoying. What takes 6 minutes and a small injection used to take days, and sometimes took everything. And look at what they reached for anyway. A sharpened stone, worked into a living tooth by someone who had nothing to dull the pain. Somebody had to be willing to do it, and somebody had to be willing to lie still and let them. That is not desperation, that is medicine. 14,000 years before anesthetic, 40,000 before antibiotics, people were already trying to fix each other. The tools were terrible. The instinct was not.